May I see your invitation, please?
I am the father of the groom.
Oh, very well, sir. Enjoy the ceremony.
On the day my son got married, I walked into that church wearing a $40 thrift store suit. Nobody knew I could have bought the entire venue 1,000 times over. I am worth $100 billion. And I was about to discover who in my family actually gave a damn about me. By the end of that night, 3 people would betray me. 1 would restore my faith in humanity. And 1 secret would destroy my family forever. This is that story. My name is Robert Thornton, and if you have never heard of me, that is exactly how I planned it. I have spent the last 30 years building an empire in the shadows, creating the data infrastructure that powers half the internet. Every time you stream a video, send an email, or upload a photo to the cloud, there is a good chance my technology is handling it. I sold my first company in 2003 for $8 billion. Most people would have retired. I reinvested every penny into artificial intelligence and cloud computing before anyone knew what those terms meant. By 2015, my net worth had crossed $100 billion. I was richer than most small nations. But I kept it quiet. No magazine covers. No charity galas. No public appearances. I watched from the sidelines as other billionaires became household names, and I was perfectly content being invisible. Because money does something to people. It changes them. It changes how they see you, how they treat you. And I wanted to know, really know, who loved me for me and who loved me for what I could give them. My wife, Sarah, died when our son Marcus was 12 years old. Pancreatic cancer. 6 months from diagnosis to the funeral. I remember holding her hand in that hospital room, watching the machines keep her alive, and she made me promise something. She said, "Robert, do not let money raise our son. You raise him. Teach him values. Teach him kindness. Make sure he knows what matters." I tried. God knows I tried. But after she died, I threw myself into work. It was easier than facing an empty house. Easier than looking at Marcus and seeing Sarah's eyes staring back at me. I gave him everything money could buy. The best private schools. Sports cars when he turned 16. A penthouse apartment in Manhattan when he graduated college. A trust fund that would keep him comfortable for life. Everything except the one thing he actually needed. My time. My attention. My presence. By the time Marcus turned 35, we had a relationship that could be measured in phone calls. 2 per year, like clockwork. Once on my birthday, though he usually forgot and called a day late with some excuse about being busy. And once when he needed money. It was always for something important, he would say. A business investment. A real estate opportunity. Emergency repairs on his car. Even though I knew he drove a $200,000 Ferrari. I always sent the money. What else was I going to do? He was my son. My only child. The last living connection to Sarah. But deep down, in a place I did not want to examine too closely, I knew the truth. Marcus did not call because he missed me. He called because he needed me. Or more specifically, he needed my money. Then in January of last year, something changed. Marcus called me on a Tuesday afternoon, which was unusual because our conversations were always scheduled, always predictable, always transactional. His voice sounded different. Excited. Almost nervous. He said, "Dad, I have news. I am getting married. Her name is Vanessa. Vanessa Chun. She works in marketing for a pharmaceutical company. She is smart, beautiful, successful. She is the one, Dad. I am really happy." For a moment, just a brief moment, I felt something I had not felt in years. Hope. Hope that maybe Marcus had found someone who would make him a better man. Hope that maybe this woman would bring out the son I remembered from before Sarah died. The boy who used to climb into my lap and ask me to explain how computers worked. The teenager who would stay up late with me, arguing about philosophy and the meaning of life. That Marcus had disappeared somewhere along the way, replaced by a man I barely recognized. A man who measured relationships in dollar signs. I said, "That is wonderful, son. I am so happy for you. When do I get to meet her?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. A pause that lasted just a beat too long. Then Marcus said, "Well, the wedding is in 6 months. June 15th. I will send you the invitation. We are keeping it pretty small. Just close family and friends. I asked if I could take him and Vanessa out to dinner, maybe get to know her before the wedding. Another pause. He said, "You know what, Dad? We are pretty busy with wedding planning. But I will definitely make sure you meet her before the big day. Do not worry." And then he said something that made my blood run cold. He said, "By the way, can you help us out with the wedding costs? Vanessa's parents are covering most of it, but we could use maybe 20 or 30,000 for the rehearsal dinner. Can you swing that?" I sat there in my penthouse office, looking out at the Manhattan skyline, and something inside me broke. My son was getting married, the most important day of his life, and his first priority was not introducing me to his future wife. It was not asking me to be involved in the planning. It was not sharing his joy with me. His first priority was asking for money. I told him I would think about it, and we would talk soon. After I hung up, I sat in that chair for 3 hours, watching the sun set over the city, and I made a decision. A decision that would either save my relationship with my son or destroy it completely. I was going to test him. I was going to attend his wedding as a poor man, not a billionaire, not even middle class. I would show up broke, desperate, and completely dependent on the kindness of others. And I would watch. I would watch how Marcus treated me, how his fiancée treated me, how everyone in that wedding treated me when they thought I had absolutely nothing to offer them. The next morning, I called my attorney, Edward Fitzgerald. Edward has been with me since the beginning, back when I was coding in a garage in Palo Alto. He is one of 3 people on earth who knows the full extent of my wealth. I told him what I was planning, and there was a long silence on the other end of the phone. Then he said, "Robert, are you sure about this? If Marcus finds out you were testing him, he might never forgive you." I said, "Edward, if my son only loves me for my money, then I have already lost him. At least this way, I will know the truth." So we got to work. Edward helped me create an elaborate fiction. We spread rumors through Marcus's social circle that I had made catastrophic investment decisions, lost everything in a series of failed cryptocurrency ventures. There were whispers of lawsuits, bankruptcy filings, asset seizures. Within 3 weeks, everyone in Marcus's world believed that Robert Thornton had gone from millionaire to penniless in spectacular fashion. I sold my penthouse. Well, technically I sold it to a shell corporation I owned, but to the outside world, it looked like a foreclosure. I moved into a small 1-bedroom apartment in Queens. 43rd floor walk-up with thin walls and a radiator that clanked all night long. The building smelled like old cooking oil and disappointment. My neighbors were immigrants, working-class families, people who struggled to make rent every month. And for the first time in decades, I felt invisible in a completely different way. Not invisible because I was hiding my wealth. Invisible because I was poor. Because I did not matter. I bought clothes from thrift stores, Goodwill, Salvation Army, shirts with someone else's name still stitched on the pocket, pants that did not quite fit, shoes that were scuffed and worn down at the heels. I learned to take the subway, something I had not done since the 1990s. I learned to budget for groceries, to choose between buying coffee or buying lunch, to feel the weight of every dollar. And then, 3 months before the wedding, I finally met Vanessa. Marcus had arranged dinner at a trendy restaurant in Manhattan. The kind of place where appetizers cost $40 and the waiters look at you with barely concealed contempt if you are not dressed in designer labels. I showed up in my thrift store suit. The jacket was too big in the shoulders. The pants were too short. I looked exactly like what I was pretending to be. A man who had fallen from grace and did not have the money to maintain appearances anymore. I saw them before they saw me. Marcus and Vanessa, sitting at a corner table, both looking at their phones. Marcus wore a suit that probably cost $5,000. Vanessa had on a dress that I would later learn was Prada, paired with jewelry that caught the light every time she moved. They looked like success, like money, like people who belonged in places like this. When I walked up to the table, Marcus looked up and I saw it. Just for a fraction of a second, I saw disappointment flash across his face. He stood up, gave me a brief hug that felt more like obligation than affection, and said, "Dad, you made it. This is Vanessa. Vanessa, this is my father, Robert." She extended her hand for a handshake, not a hug. Her grip was limp, perfunctory. She said, "Nice to finally meet you, Mr. Thornton. Marcus has told me so much about you." Her smile did not reach her eyes. I could see her taking in my appearance. The cheap suit, the scuffed shoes, the haircut I had gotten at a $10 barber shop in Queens. I watched her expression shift from polite interest to something else, something colder. She pulled her hand back a little too quickly, as if poverty might be contagious. We sat down, and the waiter came over immediately, all smiles and charm. He looked at Marcus and Vanessa with the kind of attention you give to people who clearly have money. Then his eyes flicked to me, and the smile tightened. He asked if we needed more time with the menu, and Marcus said no, we are ready. He ordered for himself and Vanessa expensive entrees, a bottle of wine that cost more than my monthly rent in Queens. Then he looked at me and said, "Dad, what do you want?" I opened the menu, and every item was a small mortgage. I said, "You know what? I am not that hungry. I will just have a side salad and some water." Marcus frowned. He said, "Come on, Dad, order something real." My treat. There was something in the way he said it. My treat. Like he was doing me a favor. Like he was the parent, and I was the child who needed to be taken care of. I ordered the cheapest pasta on the menu and thanked him quietly. The conversation during dinner was excruciating. Vanessa talked about the wedding, the venue they had chosen, a historic estate in the Hamptons, the photographer they had hired who had shot celebrity weddings, the band that usually charged $50,000 but was giving them a discount because Vanessa's father knew someone. Every sentence was about money, about status, about who they knew and what they could afford. She did not ask me a single question about myself. Not one. Marcus would occasionally try to include me in the conversation, but it always felt forced. He would say, "Dad, tell Vanessa about your old tech company." And I would start to speak, and Vanessa's eyes would glaze over. She would check her phone. She would signal the waiter for more wine. It was clear that she had already decided I was not worth her attention. At one point, about halfway through the meal, Vanessa leaned over to Marcus and whispered something. She thought she was being discreet, but I heard her. She said, "Babe, I thought you said your dad used to have money." Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He whispered back, "Yeah, he did. Things have been rough lately." Vanessa's expression changed. There was pity there, yes, but also something else. Relief, maybe. Relief that she was not marrying into my poverty. That whatever financial difficulties I was experiencing would not become her problem. When the check came, Marcus grabbed it immediately. Not because he was being generous, but because he did not want me to even attempt to pay. He did not want the embarrassment of watching his poor father fumble with a wallet that clearly did not contain enough cash to cover the bill. As we stood up to leave, Vanessa gave me another limp handshake. She said, "It was nice to meet you, Robert. We will see you at the wedding." And then she turned to Marcus and said, "Babe, we need to get going. We have that thing with my parents." They left. I stood on the sidewalk in Manhattan, watching my son and his fiancée climb into a black car service, and I felt something I had not felt in a very long time. Sadness. Deep, aching sadness. Because I realized that my test was already revealing answers I did not want to face. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you are watching from. We would love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Over the next 3 months, I attended every wedding event, every planning meeting, every family dinner. And with each passing week, the pattern became clearer. Marcus was ashamed of me. He would introduce me to people reluctantly, always with some qualifier. "This is my dad. He is going through a tough time right now. This is Robert. He used to work in tech. This is my father. He is not really involved in the wedding planning." Every introduction came with an excuse, an apology, an explanation for why I was not measuring up to whatever standard these people expected. Vanessa's parents, Richard and Catherine Chun, treated me like I was radioactive. At the first family dinner I attended, Catherine actually moved her purse to the other side of her chair when I sat down next to her. She did not think I noticed. But I did. I noticed everything. Richard Chun was a successful commercial real estate developer. Old money that had been smartly invested and carefully preserved across 3 generations. He spoke in that particular way that wealthy people do when they want you to know they are wealthy without actually saying it. He would mention casually that he just got back from St. Barth's, that he was thinking about buying a place in Aspen, that his golf club was considering raising the membership fees to $500,000 and was not that ridiculous. Every statement was a flex, a reminder of his status. And when he looked at me, I could see the calculation happening behind his eyes. This is the father of my future son-in-law. This man has nothing. This man is a liability. During that dinner, Catherine asked me directly what I did for work. I said I was between jobs right now, doing some consulting work here and there, trying to get back on my feet. She nodded with that tight smile that rich people use when they are trying to be polite but are actually horrified. Then she said, well, I am sure something will come along. You just have to stay positive. But then she leaned in closer and lowered her voice, as if she was about to share something confidential. She said, Robert, I want you to know that Marcus and Vanessa are building something really special together. They have plans, big plans, a house in Westchester, maybe children in a few years. They are setting themselves up for success. And I think it is really important that they surround themselves with people who can support that vision, people who can contribute positively to their future. She paused, letting that hang in the air. Then she said, I am sure you understand what I mean. I understood perfectly. She was telling me, as politely as she could, to stay out of the way, to not be a burden, to not expect anything from Marcus because he had more important priorities now. His new family, his new life, a life that apparently did not have room for a father who had lost everything. I went home that night to my apartment in Queens, and I sat in the dark for hours. The radiator clanked. Someone upstairs was having a loud argument in a language I did not recognize. A car alarm went off outside and stayed on for 20 minutes before someone finally shut it off. This was my life now. At least, this was the life everyone thought was mine. And the loneliness of it was crushing. Not because I was actually poor, but because I was being treated as if I was worthless. As if my value as a human being was directly tied to the number in my bank account. And the worst part was watching my own son participate in that dehumanization. Watching him laugh at jokes his future in-laws made about deadbeats and freeloaders. Watching him avoid eye contact with me when Vanessa complained about having to seat me at the wedding. But there was one person who saw me differently. Her name was Rosa Martinez, and she lived in the apartment next to mine. Rosa was 54 years old. She had immigrated from El Salvador 30 years ago with nothing but a suitcase and a dream. She worked 3 jobs. During the day, she was a home health aide, taking care of elderly patients who could not take care of themselves. In the evenings, she cleaned office buildings in Manhattan. And on weekends, she worked at a laundromat in the neighborhood. She had 2 daughters, both in college. One studying nursing, the other studying education. Rosa was sending them money every month, working herself to exhaustion so her daughters could have opportunities she never had. And despite all of that, despite the bone-deep fatigue that I could see in her eyes, she was kind. The first time we met, I was struggling to carry groceries up 4 flights of stairs. I had bought too much because I still was not used to thinking about how I would get everything home without a car service. Rosa was coming down the stairs, and she stopped. She said, "Here, let me help you with those." Before I could protest, she had taken 2 of my bags and was walking back up the stairs with me. When we got to my floor, she said, "You are the new neighbor in 4B, right? I am Rosa, 4A. If you ever need anything, just knock." I thanked her, and she smiled. A real smile. Warm and genuine. She said, "We look out for each other here. That is how we survive." Over the next few weeks, Rosa and I developed a friendship. She would knock on my door some evenings with extra food she had made. Pupusas, tamales, rice and beans that tasted like comfort. She would say I made too much and I cannot let it go to waste. "Would you like some?" We would sit on the front steps of the building and talk. She told me about her life, about leaving El Salvador during the Civil War, about crossing the border with nothing, about working jobs that paid under the table while she saved up for a lawyer to help her get legal status, about the day she became a citizen and how she cried because it meant her daughters would have a future. I told her a version of my story, the true parts, that I had worked in tech, that I had a son who I did not see very often, that I was trying to figure out what mattered in life. I did not tell her about the money, but I think, somehow, she knew I was not quite what I appeared to be. One evening, as we sat on those steps watching the neighborhood come alive in that particular way working-class neighborhoods do at dusk, she said to me, "You know, Robert, I have been cleaning offices for 20 years. I have seen a lot of rich people, and I have noticed something about them. The really rich ones, the ones with serious money, they do not need to tell you they are rich. They are comfortable in any situation. They know how to talk to janitors and CEOs the same way. But the people who used to have money and lost it, they can never quite hide it. It is in the way they hold themselves, the way they speak, the words they choose. You are one of those, aren't you?" I looked at her, surprised. I said, "What makes you think that?" She smiled. She said, "Your shoes. When you moved in, you wore expensive shoes. Italian leather. I noticed because my husband, before he died, he used to polish shoes at a hotel in Manhattan. He taught me how to recognize quality. You can buy a cheap suit at Goodwill, Robert, but rich men never get rid of their good shoes." I did not know what to say. She patted my hand and said, "It is okay. Whatever you are running from or whatever you are trying to prove, it is your business. I just want you to know that here, in this building, nobody cares about your bank account. We care about whether you are a good neighbor, whether you hold the door, whether you say good morning, whether you treat people with respect. That is what matters here. And from what I have seen, you are a good person. So whatever is happening in your life, you are going to be fine." I felt tears prick my eyes. I had not cried since Sarah's funeral, but sitting there on those steps with this woman who had every reason to be bitter and hard and suspicious. This woman who worked herself to the bone for her children. This woman who had nothing, but somehow had everything that mattered. I felt something break open inside me. I said, "Thank you, Rosa. You have no idea how much I needed to hear that." She said, "We all need to hear it, Robert. We all need to know we matter, that we are seen, that we are valued for who we are, not what we have. That is the secret to life. Everything else is just noise." I went to bed that night thinking about Rosa's words, about how she had seen through my disguise not because she was trying to catch me in a lie, but because she had spent her life around people from every walk of life. She had learned to see people, really see them, in a way that most wealthy people never learned. Because when you are poor, when you are invisible to most of society, you develop a different kind of vision. You learn to recognize kindness. You learn to spot genuine humanity. And you learn to protect yourself from people who see you as less than human. As the wedding approached, the tension in Marcus's family escalated. Vanessa became more demanding, more particular. Everything had to be perfect. The flowers had to be exactly the right shade of blush pink. The seating chart had to be arranged and rearranged a dozen times to make sure the most important guests had the best tables. The menu had to be curated by a Michelin-starred chef. She was, in her words, creating an experience, an event that people would talk about for years. And in the midst of all this planning, I was an afterthought, a problem to be managed. 2 weeks before the wedding, I received a phone call from Vanessa. She had never called me directly before. Everything had always gone through Marcus. She said, "Robert, hi. I hope I am not catching you at a bad time." I said, "No, this is fine. What can I do for you?" She said, "Well, I wanted to talk to you about the wedding. Specifically, about what you are planning to wear." I said, "I have a suit. It is not new, but it is clean and appropriate." She made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been a sigh of exasperation. She said, "Robert, this is a very upscale event. The dress code is formal. Like, really formal. And I just want to make sure you have something that fits the tone." I stayed silent, waiting to see where this was going. She continued, her voice taking on that particular tone that people use when they are trying to be helpful, but are actually being condescending. She said, I talked to Marcus, and we both think it would be better if you let us buy you a new suit. Something nice. We have a connection at a men's store in Manhattan. We can get you fitted, get you something that looks really sharp. Our treat. Consider it an early birthday present. I said, Vanessa, you do not need to do that. I have a suit. She said, I know, but Robert, this is my wedding day. I have photographers who are costing me thousands of dollars. I have videographers. Everything is going to be documented. And I just want to make sure that when people look back at the pictures, everything looks cohesive. Everything looks right. There it was. The truth underneath the polite words. I was going to ruin her pictures. My poverty was going to be visible in the photographs, and that was unacceptable. I said, okay, Vanessa, if that is what you want. She sounded relieved. She said, great. Marcus will text you the address of the store. Just go in, tell them you are with the Thornton wedding party, and they will take care of you. And Robert, try to get a haircut too. Maybe clean up the beard a little. You want to look your best, right? After she hung up, I sat there holding my phone, and I felt anger rise up in my chest. Hot and bitter. This woman, who had never asked me a single meaningful question, who had never tried to know me as a person, was now dictating my appearance because she was worried I would embarrass her. And Marcus was going along with it. My son, who I had raised, who I had loved, who I had provided for, was standing beside his fiancée as she essentially told me I was not good enough to attend his wedding without a makeover. I went to the store. I let them measure me and fit me into a suit that cost $800. Vanessa and Marcus paid for it, and the salesman packaged it up like it was a precious gift. I got the haircut. I trimmed my beard. I did everything they asked because I needed to see this through. I needed to attend that wedding and watch how everyone behaved when they thought I was at my lowest point. The night before the wedding, I could not sleep. I lay in my small bed in my small apartment in Queens, listening to the sounds of the city outside my window, and I thought about Sarah. I thought about the promise I had made to her in that hospital room. I thought about whether I had kept that promise, whether I had raised Marcus to be a good man, whether I had taught him kindness and values and what really mattered in life. And I had to face the possibility that I had failed, that in trying to give him everything, I had taught him that everything could be bought, that love was transactional, that people were only valuable if they could provide something. The wedding day arrived. It was a perfect June morning. Cloudless blue sky, warm sun, a light breeze that carried the smell of fresh cut grass and flowers. The venue was a historic estate in the Hamptons, set on 50 acres of manicured grounds. There were gardens with roses and hydrangeas, a fountain with actual swans swimming in it, a white chapel that looked like something out of a fairy tale. And everywhere, there were signs of money. Valet parking with luxury cars lined up like an auto show. Guests in designer clothes stepping out of town cars and Ubers black. Women in hats that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Men in suits that were custom tailored. I arrived in my $800 suit that Vanessa had bought me. I had taken the train from Queens to Penn Station, then caught the Hampton jitney out to the venue. The bus ride took 3 hours, and I sat next to a woman who talked on her phone the entire time about her divorce settlement. When I walked up to the entrance of the venue, there was a coordinator with a clipboard checking names. She looked at me with that particular expression that service workers use when they are trying to determine if you belong somewhere. She said, "Name, please?" I said, "Robert Thornton, father of the groom." Her eyebrows went up. She checked her list, checked it again, then said, "Oh, yes. Okay. Your seat is inside. Just follow the signs." She did not offer any of the warm welcomes she was giving to other guests. No congratulations. No how wonderful. Just a confirmation that yes, technically, I was allowed to be here. I walked through the gardens toward the chapel. Other guests were milling around, taking photos, greeting each other with air kisses and enthusiastic hugs. A few people glanced at me. Some looked away quickly. One woman actually grabbed her husband's arm and steered him in a different direction when she saw me approaching. I found my seat. Row 47. I counted. There were 50 rows total in the chapel. I was 3 rows from the back. Behind me were only Marcus's college roommate's parents, who I had never met, and a handful of Vanessa's distant relatives. I sat down and looked around. The front rows were filled with Vanessa's family. Her parents, her siblings, her aunts and uncles. The Chun family dynasty in all its glory. Marcus's side was less populated. A few cousins he barely spoke to. Some friends from college and grad school. His best man, a guy named Tyler who I had met exactly once at Marcus's graduation. And then me. Row 47. So far back that I could barely see the altar. So far back that when the string quartet started playing, the music was almost drowned out by the rustle of programs and the whisper of conversations. This was my place in my son's life. Row 47. Almost invisible. Almost not there at all. The ceremony began. The bridesmaids walked down the aisle in their blush pink dresses. Then the groomsmen in their matching tuxedos. Then Marcus, looking handsome and confident and happy. He walked to the front of the chapel with his mother's brother, who had stepped in to play the father role since apparently I was not suitable for that honor. Then the music changed and everyone stood. Vanessa appeared at the back of the chapel on her father's arm. She was stunning. I will give her that. Her dress was elaborate, covered in lace and beading that probably took hundreds of hours to create. Her veil was cathedral length, trailing behind her like a river of silk. She walked slowly down the aisle, savoring every moment, and I watched her face. She was glowing. Not with love, I realized. With triumph. This was her moment. Her stage. Her performance. And she was nailing it. They reached the front and the ceremony began. The officiant, some friend of Vanessa's family who had gotten ordained online specifically for this event, spoke about love and commitment and building a life together. He asked Marcus and Vanessa to face each other and hold hands. They exchanged vows that they had written themselves. Marcus went first. He talked about how Vanessa made him want to be a better man, how she challenged him and supported him and believed in him, how he could not imagine his life without her. His voice cracked with emotion, and I saw several people in the front rows wipe away tears. Then Vanessa spoke. She talked about partnership and respect and shared dreams. She talked about the future they would build together, the home they would make, the family they would create. She never once mentioned love. Not directly. It was all about building and creating and achieving. It was a business plan disguised as wedding vows. They exchanged rings. The officiant pronounced them husband and wife. Marcus kissed Vanessa and everyone applauded. The string quartet played something upbeat and celebratory as the new couple walked back down the aisle. Marcus was beaming. Vanessa was waving to guests like she was a celebrity at a premiere. They passed my row and Marcus glanced in my direction. Our eyes met for just a second. I smiled at him, tried to put all the love and pride I felt into that smile. He looked away, kept walking, kept waving, kept basking in the attention, and I sat back down in row 47 while everyone else filed out to go to the cocktail hour, and I felt something I had not expected to feel. Relief. Because now I knew. Now I had my answer. My son was ashamed of me, and that truth, as painful as it was better than living in uncertainty. The reception was held in a massive tent on the grounds of the estate. The tent had been transformed into something out of a magazine. Crystal chandeliers hanging from the ceiling. Long tables covered in white linens and elaborate floral centerpieces. A stage for the band. A dance floor that looked like it was made of polished marble. A bar that stretched the length of one entire side of the tent, staffed by a dozen bartenders in matching vests. The cocktail hour had already been going for 30 minutes by the time I made it to the tent, and the guests were well into their second or third drinks. I walked through the entrance and was immediately stopped by the same coordinator who had checked me in at the chapel. She said, "Sir, I need to show you to your table." I said, "Okay." She led me through the tent, weaving between tables, past the prime spots near the dance floor, past the tables where Vanessa's family was holding court, past the tables where Marcus's friends were laughing and clinking glasses, all the way to the very back corner of the tent, near the kitchen entrance, where the staff was walking in and out carrying trays of appetizers. She stopped at a table with a small card that said Table 53. She said, "Here you are. If you need anything, just flag down one of the servers." Then she walked away, leaving me standing there looking at my table. It was set for 8. Currently, there were 2 other people sitting there. An elderly couple who introduced themselves as Tom and Patricia. They were Vanessa's great-aunt and great-uncle, visiting from Florida. They had thick Southern accents, and they seemed genuinely kind. Patricia said, "Oh, are you with Marcus's side or Vanessa's side?" I said, "I am Marcus's father." Her eyes widened. She said, "Oh my goodness, you are the father of the groom? And they put you back here? That does not seem right." I said, "It is fine. I am just happy to be here." Tom shook his head. He said, "Weddings these days, everything is about appearances, about showing off. When Patricia and I got married in 1968, we had the ceremony in a church and the reception in her parents' backyard. 50 people. Her mother made the food. My brother played guitar. And you know what? It was perfect, because it was about the love, not about impressing people." Over the next hour, the rest of our table filled in. There was Marcus's college roommate's parents, who barely spoke to anyone and spent most of the evening on their phones. There was a random cousin of Vanessa's who had been seated at our table because she had brought an uninvited +1 and they needed somewhere to stick them. And there was one empty chair that no one ever sat in. We were the island of misfit toys, the people who did not quite fit anywhere else, the people who were obligatory invitations, the people who did not matter enough to be placed anywhere visible. Meanwhile, 20 feet away, Vanessa's parents were at a table right next to the head table, surrounded by their friends and family, laughing and toasting, and being photographed by the roaming photographers who were capturing every moment of this event. I watched Marcus and Vanessa make their entrance as husband and wife. The DJ announced them with dramatic flair, and everyone stood and applauded as they walked to the head table, waving and smiling like royalty greeting their subjects. The meal was served. It was excellent. A 5-course dinner that probably cost $300 per person. I barely tasted it. I was too busy watching the dynamics, watching who spoke to whom, watching who was important and who was not. During the salad course, a photographer came by our table. He took a few quick shots, barely looking through the viewfinder, clearly just checking a box that said photograph every table. Compare that to the time he spent at Vanessa's parents' table, where he took at least 50 photos from different angles, arranging people, adjusting lighting, making sure everything was perfect. After dinner, the speeches began. Vanessa's father went first. Richard Chun stood up, microphone in hand, and delivered a speech that was part toast, part performance, part flex. He talked about how proud he was of his daughter, how she had always been driven and ambitious and focused, how she had found a partner in Marcus who shared her values and her vision for success. He said, "Marcus, you are getting an incredible woman. Smart, beautiful, determined. I know you two are going to build an amazing life together." And then he added, with just a hint of an edge to his voice, "Just make sure you keep up with her. She sets a high bar." Everyone laughed. It was supposed to be a joke, but there was truth in it. An expectation, a warning. Then came the best man speech. Tyler, Marcus's friend from college, told stories about their glory days. Spring break trips, late-night poker games, the time they drove to Las Vegas on a whim and won $3,000 at blackjack. Every story was about money, about spending money, about having money, about the lifestyle they had lived. Tyler raised his glass and said, "Marcus, you are the most generous guy I know. Always picking up the tab, always helping out your friends. That is the kind of man you are. And Vanessa, you hit the jackpot with this one." To the happy couple, everyone drank. I felt sick, because I realized that this was how Marcus's friends saw him, as the guy with money, the guy who paid for things, not as a person with depth or character or values, just as a wallet. Then it was Marcus's turn to speak. My son stood up, handsome in his tuxedo, and took the microphone. He thanked everyone for coming. He thanked Vanessa's parents for their generosity in hosting such an incredible event. He thanked his friends for their support over the years. He talked about how lucky he was to have found Vanessa, how she made him better, how she inspired him, how he could not wait to spend the rest of his life with her. And then he paused, looked around the room, and said, "I also want to thank my father, Robert, for being here today. I know things have been difficult for him lately, but he made the effort to be here, and that means a lot. So Dad, wherever you are, thank you. Wherever you are." Like he did not even know where I was sitting. Like he had not looked at the seating chart and seen that his own father was at table 53, hidden in the back corner. There was a smattering of polite applause. A few people craned their necks trying to spot me. I half raised my hand in acknowledgement. Marcus had already moved on. He was toasting his new wife, kissing her, basking in the applause. I set down my glass and stood up. Patricia, the kind great-aunt from Florida, touched my arm. She said, "Are you leaving?" I said, "I just need some air. I will be back." I walked out of the tent into the cool evening. The sun had set, and the grounds were lit with thousands of string lights. It looked magical, like something out of a dream. I walked away from the tent, away from the music and laughter, toward the gardens. I found a bench near the rose bushes and I sat down. I do not know how long I sat there. Maybe 10 minutes. Maybe 30. I was trying to process everything I had seen, everything I had felt. The way Marcus had introduced me with apologies. The way Vanessa had looked at me with barely concealed disgust. The way I had been seated as far from the center of the action as physically possible. The way my own son had forgotten where I was sitting. The way everyone had treated me like I was an inconvenience. A charity case. Someone to be tolerated but not embraced. I heard footsteps on the gravel path and looked up. It was Vanessa's mother, Catherine Chun. She was walking toward me, drink in hand, and when she saw me she paused like she was considering turning around. But then she seemed to make a decision and she walked over. She said, "Robert, taking a break from the festivities?" I said something like that. She sat down on the bench, not too close, maintaining a careful distance. She said, "It is a beautiful wedding. Vanessa worked so hard to plan everything." I said she did an excellent job. "Everything is very impressive." There was a silence. Catherine sipped her drink. Then she said, "Robert, I wanted to talk to you. I think we got off on the wrong foot when we first met. I want you to know that I do not have anything against you personally." I said, "Okay." She continued, her voice taking on that tone that wealthy people use when they think they are being compassionate but are actually being condescending. She said, "I understand that you have been going through a difficult time. Financial troubles. It happens. The economy is tough. Not everyone is cut out for business. But I want you to understand something. Vanessa and Marcus are starting their lives together. They have plans, goals. They are building something. And I think it is very important that they have the space to do that without unnecessary complications." I stayed quiet, waiting to see where this was going. She said, "What I mean is, they do not need people who are going to be a drain on them, emotionally or financially. They need to focus on their future, on building their careers, on creating the life they want. And I think, as Marcus's father, you can support that by giving them some space, by not making demands on their time or their resources. I am sure you understand." I turned to look at her. This woman who had everything, who had been born into wealth and married into more wealth and never spent a single day of her life worrying about money. This woman who was now sitting on a bench at her daughter's $500,000 wedding, telling me to stay away from my own son. I said, "So you are asking me to keep my distance from Marcus?" She looked relieved that I understood. She said, "Not forever, just while they are getting established. You do not want to be a burden on them, do you? You love your son. I know you do. And the best way to love him right now is to let him build his life without worrying about you." I felt a rage building in my chest that I had to work very hard to control. I said, "Catherine, has Marcus told you he is worried about me being a burden?" She blinked. She said, "Well, no, not in so many words. But I can tell he is concerned. And as his new family, we want to protect him from stress." I said, "How thoughtful of you." She stood up, smoothing her dress. She said, I am glad we had this talk, Robert. I think we understand each other now. Enjoy the rest of the wedding. And then she walked back toward the tent, leaving me sitting there in the dark. I wanted to leave. Every fiber of my being wanted to call a car service, go back to Manhattan, retrieve my real life from the storage unit where I had hidden it, and never speak to any of these people again. But I had come this far. I had endured months of humiliation and judgment and dismissal. I owed it to myself to see this through, to witness every moment of this charade, so that when I finally revealed the truth, I would know beyond any doubt that I had given Marcus every possible chance to choose differently. I walked back into the tent. The dancing had started. Marcus and Vanessa were in the middle of the floor doing their first dance. It was choreographed. They had clearly taken lessons. It was perfect and polished and utterly without spontaneity or joy. It was a performance. Everything about this wedding was a performance. When the song ended, the DJ announced the father-daughter dance. Richard Chun walked out onto the floor, and Vanessa joined him. They danced to some Frank Sinatra song, and everyone watched and smiled and took photos. It was sweet. It was touching. It was everything a father-daughter dance should be. Then the DJ said, and now, ladies and gentlemen, we invite the groom and his father to the floor for their dance. There was a spotlight that started searching the room. I stood up from my table in the back corner. The spotlight found me. There was an audible reaction from the crowd. A murmur. Some surprise. Some confusion. People craning their necks to see who this person was all the way in the back. I walked toward the dance floor. It felt like it took an hour. Every step, I could feel eyes on me. Judging. Assessing. Wondering. Marcus was standing in the center of the floor, waiting. His face was tight. Uncomfortable. He looked like he was about to have a root canal, not dance with his father at his wedding. I reached him, and we faced each other. The music started. Some generic slow song that meant nothing to either of us. We started to move in that awkward way that men do when they are forced to dance together. And then Marcus leaned in close and whispered, "Did you have to wear that suit?" I said, "This is the suit you and Vanessa bought me, Marcus." He said, "I know, but it looks cheap. People can tell." I said, "People can tell what? That I am poor? That your father does not have money? That I am an embarrassment?" He pulled back slightly, his jaw tight. He hissed, "Keep your voice down." I whispered back, "I am not making a scene. I am asking you a question. What exactly is the problem here?" He said through gritted teeth, "The problem is that Vanessa's family thinks you are pathetic. They think I come from nothing. They are judging me based on you." I said, "And does that bother you? That they are judging you based on me?" He said, "Yes, Dad, it does. Because I have worked hard to build a certain image, a certain reputation, and you showing up looking like a homeless person ruins that." I felt something crack inside me. I said, "Marcus, do you remember when you were 8 years old and you fell off your bike and broke your arm?" He looked confused by the question. He said, "What does that have to do with anything?" I said, "You were so brave. You did not cry even though I knew it hurt like hell. Your mother and I took you to the hospital, and while we were waiting for the doctor, you looked up at me and you said, 'Dad, even if my arm does not work right anymore, you will still love me, right?' And I told you that I would love you no matter what happened, no matter who you became. I would always love you because you were my son. Do you remember that?" He said vaguely. I said, "I need you to understand something, Marcus. I am still that person. I am still your father. And the fact that I do not have money right now does not change that. It does not make me any less your father. It does not make me any less deserving of your respect and your love." The music was still playing. We were still moving in slow circles on the dance floor. But something had shifted. Marcus's expression had changed. There was confusion there, maybe even a flicker of guilt. He said quietly, "I am not saying I do not love you, Dad. I am just saying this is hard for me. Having people know that you are struggling, having to explain it, having to make excuses." I said, "You should not have to make excuses for me, Marcus. You should be proud that your father is here, that he loves you enough to show up even when it is hard, even when he is not welcome, even when his own son is ashamed of him." Marcus opened his mouth to respond, but the song ended. The moment was over. People applauded. The spell was broken. Marcus stepped back and said, "Thanks for the dance, Dad." Then he walked away, back to his bride, back to his new family, back to his performance of the perfect wedding. I stood alone on the dance floor for a few seconds too long before walking back to table 53. Patricia, the kind great-aunt, said to me that looked like a tough conversation. I said it was. She said, "For what it is worth, I think you are very brave for being here." Her husband Tom nodded. He said, "Family is complicated, but you showed up. That is what matters." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that showing up was enough. But in that moment, standing in the back corner of my son's wedding reception, watching him celebrate with people who had written me off as irrelevant, I realized that showing up only matters if the people you show up for actually see you. And Marcus did not see me. He saw an obligation, an embarrassment, a problem to be managed. After the father-son dance, I tried to blend into the background. I sat at my table and picked at the dessert course. I watched Marcus and Vanessa cut their elaborate wedding cake. I watched them do the bouquet toss and the garter toss and all the other traditional rituals that weddings require. I watched their friends get drunk and dance and take selfies in front of the elaborate flower wall that had been set up specifically for social media photos. I was invisible again. Just another guest. Just another body taking up space at table 53. Around 10 o'clock, I decided I had had enough. I stood up, said goodbye to Tom and Patricia, and walked toward the exit. On my way out, I passed Marcus and Vanessa. They were standing with a group of their friends, all holding champagne glasses, all laughing at something someone had said. I paused, debated saying goodbye, decided against it. What would be the point? They had not sought me out all evening. They had not checked to see if I was having a good time. They had not introduced me to their friends. I was not part of their celebration. I was just someone who happened to be there. I walked out into the night and called an Uber to take me to the bus station. The driver was a young guy, maybe 25, who spent the whole ride talking on his Bluetooth to his girlfriend about their plans for the weekend. I leaned my head against the window and watched the Hamptons pass by. All those enormous houses, all that wealth, all those gates and hedges and security systems designed to keep people like me out. Or maybe not like me. Like the me I was pretending to be. The poor me. The failed me. The me that people did not want to acknowledge or engage with or care about. The bus ride back to the city was long and quiet. Most of the passengers were workers who had been hired to staff various Hamptons events. Caterers, bartenders, cleaners, people who served the wealthy and then took the bus home to their own lives. I sat in the back and stared out the window into the darkness. When I finally got back to my apartment in Queens, it was after midnight. I climbed the 4 flights of stairs and unlocked my door. The apartment felt smaller than ever, more cramped, more depressing. I sat on the edge of my bed and I pulled out my phone. I opened my banking app, the one that showed the real accounts, the ones that held the $100 billion, the money that nobody knew about except 3 people on Earth. I stared at that number, at all those zeros, and I realized that it meant nothing, absolutely nothing, because I would trade every penny of it to have my son look at me the way he used to when he was 8 years old, before Sarah died, before money became the only language we spoke. There was a knock at my door, soft, hesitant. I looked at the time, 12:30 in the morning. I opened the door, and Rosa was standing there in her nurse scrubs. She said, "I saw your light on. I just got home from my shift. Are you okay?" I said honestly, "No, I am not okay." She said, "Can I come in?" I stepped aside and she came into my small apartment. She looked around, took in the sparse furniture, the single plate in the dish rack, the emptiness of it all. She said, "You went to the wedding today. How was it?" I said it was exactly what I expected and somehow worse than I could have imagined. She sat down at my small kitchen table. She said, "Tell me." So I did. I told her everything. About being seated in row 47. About the speech where Marcus said, "Wherever you are." About the father-son dance where he criticized my appearance. About Catherine Chun telling me to stay away from my son. About the whole humiliating, degrading, heartbreaking experience. Rosa listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Robert, can I ask you something?" I said, "Of course." She said, "Why did you really do this? This whole pretending to be poor thing. What were you hoping to find out?" I said I wanted to know if Marcus loved me for me, or if he only loved me for what I could give him. She nodded. She said, "And now you know." I said, "Yes. Now I know." She leaned forward. She said, "But Robert, did you ever consider that maybe you were testing yourself too?" I looked at her, confused. I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "You spent 6 months being invisible, being treated like you did not matter, being dismissed and judged and pushed aside. And you endured it. You showed up anyway. You stood in the back row. You wore the cheap suit. You danced with your son even when he was ashamed of you. Why? What were you proving?" I said I wanted to prove that I could love him unconditionally, that I could be there for him even when he was at his worst. Rosa smiled sadly. She said, "But Marcus does not know that. To him, you are just his poor father who showed up to his wedding. He does not know you were testing him. He does not know you were making a choice to be there despite how he treated you. So who was the test really for? Was it for Marcus? Or was it for you?" I stared at her. Her words hit me like a physical blow. Because she was right. Part of me had been testing Marcus, yes. But another part of me had been testing myself. Proving to myself that I could be the father Sarah had asked me to be. That I could put Marcus first even when it hurt. That I could love him even when he did not love me back the way I wanted him to. Rosa said the question you need to ask yourself now is, what are you going to do with what you learned? Are you going to reveal the truth? Are you going to punish Marcus for failing your test? Are you going to walk away? Or are you going to figure out how to actually build a relationship with your son that is not based on money or tests or games? I said I do not know. I honestly do not know. She stood up. She said, "Well, you do not have to decide tonight. But Robert, if I can give you one piece of advice from someone who has spent her whole life without money, loving someone is not about what you can give them or what they can give you. It is about showing up. It is about being present. It is about being honest. You have been present and you have shown up. But you have not been honest. You have been playing a character. And until you stop doing that, you will never know who your son really is. And he will never know who you really are." After Rosa left, I lay in bed and thought about her words. About honesty. About tests. About what I was really trying to accomplish with this whole charade. And I realized that she was right. I had been so focused on proving that Marcus was shallow, that he only cared about money, that I had not stopped to consider what I was teaching him by hiding the truth. I was teaching him that his father was willing to lie, to manipulate, to play games. How was that any better than him treating me poorly when he thought I was poor? I made a decision that night. I was going to tell Marcus the truth, not as punishment, not to prove a point, but because if there was any chance of salvaging our relationship, it had to be built on honesty. The next morning, Sunday, I called Marcus. It went to voicemail. I said, "Marcus, this is Dad. I need to talk to you. It is important. Can you come by my apartment tomorrow before you leave for your honeymoon? Please. It is really important." He did not call back. I waited all day. Nothing. I texted him. "Dad here. Really need to talk before you leave. Can you spare 30 minutes? No response. Monday morning, I tried calling again. Straight to voicemail. I realized he had probably turned off his phone. He and Vanessa were leaving for their honeymoon in Bali that afternoon. They would be gone for 2 weeks. My revelation would have to wait. Those 2 weeks were the longest of my life. I went back to my routine, taking the subway, shopping for groceries, sitting on the front steps with Rosa. But everything felt different now. I was not playing a character anymore. I was just existing in this space between my real life and my pretend life, trying to figure out how to bridge the gap. Rosa and I talked a lot during those weeks. She shared more about her life, about the daughter who was studying to be a nurse and wanted to work with underserved communities, about the daughter who was studying education and wanted to teach at inner-city schools. She said, "My girls, they know what it is like to struggle, and that has made them better people. They have empathy. They have compassion. They understand that everyone has a story. I wish more people were raised with that understanding." I said, "You are an incredible mother, Rosa. She laughed. She said, I am a tired mother, but I am trying my best. That is all any of us can do, right? Try our best and hope it is enough. Marcus and Vanessa returned from their honeymoon at the end of June. I waited 3 days to give them time to settle in and deal with jet lag. Then I called Marcus. He actually answered this time. He said, Hey Dad, what is up? His voice was light, casual, like nothing had happened at the wedding, like he had not spent the whole event treating me like an unwanted obligation. I said, Marcus, I need to talk to you. In person. It is important. He said, okay, but this week is crazy. I have back-to-back meetings. Can it wait? I said, no. It cannot wait. I need to see you. Tomorrow. He sighed. He said, fine. I can do lunch. There is a place near my office. I will text you the address. We met the next day at a trendy restaurant in Tribeca, the kind of place where the waiters describe each dish like it is a work of art, and the bill for 2 people is enough to feed a family for a week. Marcus was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table, looking at his phone. He looked tan and relaxed from the honeymoon. He stood when he saw me, and we hugged briefly. He said, How have you been, Dad? I said, I have been thinking a lot. We sat down and ordered. Marcus got the lobster. I got a salad. When the waiter left, Marcus said, So what did you want to talk about? You sounded pretty serious on the phone. I took a deep breath. I said, Marcus, I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you a long time ago. I am not poor. I never was. He looked at me blankly. He said, What? I said, I have money. A lot of money. I staged the financial collapse. I made people believe I had lost everything. But it was not true. I am worth over $100 billion. Marcus stared at me. His face went through a series of expressions. Confusion. Disbelief. Anger. He said, What the hell are you talking about? I pulled out my phone. I opened the banking app. I turned the screen to face him. He looked at it. At the account balance that showed more zeros than most people see in a lifetime. He said, This is a joke. This is photoshopped or something. I said, It is not a joke, Marcus. I am telling you the truth. I own the data infrastructure company that powers most of the cloud computing systems in the world. I sold my original company in 2003 and reinvested in AI and machine learning before anyone else saw the potential. I have been a billionaire for over 20 years. And 6 months ago, I decided to test you, to see how you would treat me if you thought I had nothing. Marcus stood up so fast his chair fell backward. People at nearby tables looked over. He said, You tested me? You pretended to be poor to test me? I said, Yes. He laughed. A harsh, bitter sound. He said, You are insane. You are actually insane. Do you know what you put me through? Do you know how embarrassing it was to have my father show up to my wedding looking like a homeless person? I said, I wanted to see who you really are, Marcus. I wanted to know if you loved me, or if you just loved my money. He leaned forward, his hands on the table, his face flushed with anger. He said, You want to know who I really am? I am the guy whose father abandoned him after his mother died. I am the guy who had to raise himself because his dad was too busy building his empire. I am the guy who learned that money was the only language you spoke. So yeah, I value money. You taught me to. The words hit me like a punch. Because they were true. Every word. I had abandoned Marcus after Sarah died. I had used money as a substitute for presents. I had taught him that wealth was what mattered because I had never given him anything else. I said quietly, You are right. I failed you, Marcus. After your mother died, I should have been there for you. I should have put down the work and focused on you. I did not. And I am sorry. But these last 6 months, watching you treat me like I was worthless because I did not have money, that showed me that I failed you in an even worse way. I taught you that a person's value is determined by their bank account. And I need you to understand that is not true. Marcus was shaking his head. He said, No. No. You do not get to do this. You do not get to run some twisted experiment on me and then act like you are teaching me a lesson. You lied to me. You manipulated me. You made me look like an idiot in front of my wife and her family. I said I made you look like an idiot? Or did your behavior make you look like an idiot? Marcus grabbed his jacket. He said, I am done with this conversation. I am done with you. You want to know if I love you for your money? Fine. Here is your answer. Keep your money. Keep your billions. I do not want any of it. I do not want anything from you. He started to walk away. I stood up. I said, Marcus, wait. Please. He turned back. His eyes were red. He said, what do you want from me, Dad? What could I possibly say right now that would make any of this okay? I said, I want you to have a choice. I have 2 legal documents prepared. One is a trust fund with $50 million in it. It is yours. No strings attached. You can take it and never speak to me again. You can build your life and I will stay out of it. Or you can walk away from the money. All of it. Prove to me that our relationship matters more than the inheritance. And if you do that, if you choose me over the money, then everything I have will be yours when I die. Every penny of the $100 billion. But you have to make that choice now. Today. Marcus stared at me. He said, you are giving me an ultimatum. I said, I am giving you a choice. He laughed again. That same bitter sound. He said, and if I take the $50 million, you will what? Write me off? Cut me out of your life? I said, no. If you take the $50 million, I will respect your decision. I will understand that you need space, that you need to build your own life, and I will let you go. He stood there for a long moment. People were definitely staring now. The whole restaurant had gone quiet. Then Marcus said, I need time to think about this. I said, okay. How much time do you need? He said, I do not know. A week. A month. However long it takes. I shook my head. I said, you have until the end of today. Make your choice and call me. I will have my attorney send you whichever documents you decide on. Marcus looked at me like he did not recognize me. He said, you really are ruthless. You know that? This is why you are so successful. Because you do not care who you hurt as long as you get what you want. Then he walked out of the restaurant. I sat back down. The waiter came over nervously and asked if everything was all right. I said, yes, everything is fine. Can I have the check? I paid for both meals, even though Marcus had barely touched his lobster, and I left. I walked through Tribeca in a daze. I had just given my son an ultimatum. $50 million or a relationship with me. It was a test within a test, and I had no idea what he would choose. I went back to my apartment in Queens. Rosa was outside watering the small garden she had planted in the patch of dirt by the front steps. She saw my face and said, what happened? I told her. She set down the watering can and came to sit on the steps with me. She said, Robert, do you want my honest opinion? I said, yes. She said, I think you are still playing games. You are still testing. You are still trying to control the outcome instead of just being honest about what you want. I said, what do you mean? She said, you are making Marcus choose between money and you. But that is a false choice. Why can it not be both? Why can he not have a relationship with you and also benefit from your wealth? Why does it have to be one or the other? I said, because I need to know if he loves me. She said, but do you love him? Because love does not come with conditions. Love does not say choose me or choose money. Love says I am here regardless. I will love you regardless. I will support you regardless. I sat there on those steps and I realized she was right. Again, I was still trying to control Marcus. Still trying to force him into being the son I wanted instead of accepting the son he was. The son I had helped create through my own failings. My phone rang at 8:30 that evening. It was Marcus. I answered. I said hello. He said, I have made my decision. My heart was pounding. I said, okay. He said, I will take the $50 million, but not for the reason you think. I am taking it because I need to prove something. To myself. I need to know that I can build something on my own. That I can be successful without your name. Without your connections. Without your money backing me up. I want 5 years, Dad. 5 years where we do not talk. Where I build my own company. Where I succeed or fail based on my own merit. And then, after 5 years, if you still want a relationship, we can try. We can start over. As equals. Not as father and son. Not as billionaire and heir. Just as 2 men who happen to be related. I was quiet for a moment. Then I said, okay. Marcus said, okay. That is it. I said, yes. I will have Edward send you the trust documents tomorrow. $50 million. It is yours. Build something great, Marcus. He said, Dad. I said, yes. He said, I do not know if I love you. I do not know if I even like you. But I do know that you are my father. And maybe, in 5 years, That will mean something again. Then he hung up. I sat in my apartment, and I did not cry. I did not rage. I just felt empty. I had tested my son, and he had failed my test. Or maybe I had failed his test. Or maybe we had both failed each other in ways that could not be fixed with money or time or ultimatums. Rosa knocked on my door an hour later. She said, "I brought you dinner." I let her in, and we ate in silence. Then she said, 5 years is not that long. I said, it feels like forever. She said, time moves differently when you are healing. And both of you need to heal. You from Sarah, him from growing up without a father. 5 years might be exactly what you both need. I said, what if he builds his life and decides he does not want me in it? What if 5 years turns into 10 years, turns into never seeing him again? She said, then at least you will have given him the space to make that choice. And you will know you did not try to buy his love or manipulate his decisions. You will know you let him be free. And freedom, Robert, that is the greatest gift you can give someone you love. The next day, I moved out of the apartment in Queens. I retrieved my real life from storage. I went back to my penthouse in Manhattan. I resumed my work. I met with my boards. I checked in on my investments. I went back to being Robert Thornton, the invisible billionaire that nobody had heard of. But something had changed. I could not go back to the way things were before. I could not pretend that the last 6 months had not happened, because they had revealed something to me that I had not wanted to see, that I was lonely, profoundly, deeply lonely, and no amount of money could fix that. So I made some changes. I started having dinner with Rosa once a week. She would come to my penthouse and her eyes would get wide at the size of it, at the view, at the artwork on the walls. But then she would roll up her sleeves and say, okay, what are we cooking? Because she refused to let me order from restaurants. She said food tastes better when you make it with your hands and share it with people you care about. I started volunteering. I found a nonprofit that provided technology training to underserved communities. I taught coding classes to teenagers in the Bronx. I helped single mothers learn how to use computers so they could get better jobs. I donated money, yes, but more importantly, I donated time. And slowly, very slowly, I started to feel like maybe I was becoming the person Sarah had wanted me to be. The months passed, then a year, then 2 years. Marcus and I did not speak. I followed his career from a distance. He had started a company focused on using AI to improve healthcare diagnostics. It was ambitious. It was risky. And from what I could tell from the business journals and tech blogs, it was failing. He had burned through $30 million in the first 18 months. His partners had left. His investors were pulling out. He was running out of money and running out of time. I wanted to help. Every instinct in my body screamed to step in, to write a check, to save him from failure. But I did not, because Rosa had told me, and I had finally listened, that sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the freedom to fail. So I watched from the sidelines as Marcus's company collapsed. I read the articles about his failed pivot, about the layoffs, about the shuttered offices, and I hoped that he was learning something valuable. That failure would teach him something success never could. In year 3, something changed. Marcus started over. He took the remaining $5 million he had left, and he built something smaller, something more focused, something that actually worked. His new company partnered with rural hospitals to provide AI-powered diagnostic tools that could help doctors in underserved areas. It was not flashy. It was not going to make him a billionaire, but it was making a difference. And from what I could see in the interviews he started giving, he was proud of it in a way he had never been proud of anything before. By year 4, his company had expanded to 40 hospitals across 15 states. He had raised a Series B funding round. He was profitable. He was successful. Not because of me. Not because of my money or my name or my connections, but because he had failed and learned and tried again. He had done it himself. I started to hope that maybe, just maybe, when year 5 came around, we might actually have a chance at rebuilding something. Year 5 arrived in June, 5 years to the day after his wedding. I did not call him. I had promised him space, and I was going to honor that promise. But I hoped he would call me. I spent the day of the anniversary restless. I could not focus on work. I kept checking my phone. Nothing. The day passed. Nothing. I started to accept that maybe this was it. Maybe Marcus had decided that 5 years of peace was better than reopening old wounds. Maybe he had moved on and built a life that did not include me. And maybe that was okay. Maybe that was what I deserved. Then, 3 days later, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost did not answer. But something made me pick up. I said hello. A voice said, "Dad, it is Marcus." My heart stopped. I said, "Marcus." He said, "I am sorry I did not call on the exact anniversary. I have been trying to figure out what to say, how to start this conversation. I wanted to have the perfect words, and I realized there are no perfect words. So I am just calling." I said, "I am glad you called." There was a pause. Then he said, "I am in San Francisco. There is a tech conference. I am presenting my company. And I looked up from the stage during my pitch, and I saw you. In the back of the room. Watching. My breath caught. I said, "You saw me." He said, "Yeah, I saw you. You have been there before, haven't you? At other conferences. Other events. I have seen you in the backgrounds of photos. Standing in crowds. Always watching. Never approaching." I did not know what to say. The truth was, yes, I had been following his career. I had attended 3 conferences where he was speaking. I had stood in the back and watched him present. Watched him grow more confident. Watched him become a leader. But I had never approached him. I had kept my promise. Marcus said, "Why did you come if you were not going to talk to me?" I said, "Because I wanted to see you. I wanted to know you were okay. I wanted to watch you succeed." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I failed, you know. In the beginning. I lost almost everything. The company I started with your money, it collapsed. I made every mistake you could possibly make. And there were nights when I wanted to call you. When I wanted to ask for help. When I wanted you to fix it. But I did not. Because I needed to know I could do it myself." I said, "I know. I watched it happen. It was the hardest thing I have ever done, not stepping in." He laughed softly. He said, "You watched me fail, and you did not help." I said, "I watched you fail, and then I watched you get back up. I watched you learn. I watched you build something real. Something that actually matters. And I have never been more proud of you." There was a long silence. Then Marcus said, "Vanessa and I got divorced. 2 years ago." I said, "I know. I am sorry." He said, "Do not be. It was the right decision. She married me because she thought I was going to be rich. When the company failed and the money ran out, she left. It hurt at the time. But looking back, it was probably the best thing that could have happened. I learned who my real friends were. Who actually cared about me. It was a small list. But it was honest. I said, "Marcus, I owe you an apology. What I did, testing you at your wedding, lying about my financial situation, giving you that ultimatum, it was wrong. I was trying to control you. I was trying to force you to be the son I wanted instead of accepting the son you were. And I am sorry." He said, "I have spent 5 years thinking about that. About what you did. And I was angry for a long time. Furious, actually. But then something changed. I failed. Spectacularly. And in that failure, I started to understand what you were trying to teach me. That money does not define worth. That success is not about wealth. That the people who matter are the ones who show up when you have nothing to offer. And Dad, you showed up. You showed up to my wedding even though I treated you terribly. You showed up to my conferences even though I told you to stay away. You were there. In the background. Always watching. Always caring. Even when I did not deserve it. I felt tears in my eyes. I said, "Marcus, I love you. I have always loved you. Even when I was terrible at showing it." He said, "I know. And I think maybe I am ready to try. To have a relationship. To figure out what it means to be your son without the money and the tests and the games. Just us. Just 2 people trying to figure out how to be family." I said I would like that very much. He said, "I am coming to New York next month. Can we have dinner? Just dinner. Nothing formal. Nothing complicated. Just 2 guys talking." I said yes. I would love that. We hung up. I sat in my penthouse looking out at the city, and I felt something I had not felt in years. Hope. Real, genuine hope. Marcus came to New York in July. We met at a small Italian restaurant in the West Village. The kind of place with checkered tablecloths and candles and wine bottles, and no pretense. We sat across from each other, and it was awkward at first. We did not know how to talk to each other without the weight of the past hanging over us. But slowly, carefully, we found our rhythm. He told me about his company, about the hospitals he was helping, about the doctors who sent him thank you notes saying his technology had helped them catch diagnoses they would have missed, about the patients whose lives had been saved because of the tools he had built. His eyes lit up when he talked about it, not with the arrogance I had seen at his wedding, but with genuine passion, with purpose. I told him about my volunteer work, about Rosa and her daughters, about the teenagers in the Bronx who were learning to code, about how I had spent the last 5 years trying to figure out what it meant to use wealth for something other than accumulating more wealth. We talked for 3 hours. When the check came, I reached for it. Marcus reached for it at the same time. We looked at each other. I said, "Let me get this one. You can get the next one." He smiled. He said, "There is going to be a next one?" I said, "I hope so." He said, "Me too." Over the next year, we had dinner once a month. Sometimes in New York, sometimes in San Francisco. We were learning each other, learning to be father and son without the baggage, without the expectations, without the transactions. It was hard. There were moments when old patterns would surface, when I would want to offer advice he did not ask for, when he would get defensive about choices I questioned. But we worked through it. We were both trying, and that was enough. Then one day, about 18 months after that first dinner, Marcus called me. He said, "Dad, I need to tell you something. Someone has been buying shares of my company. Anonymous purchases over the last 2 years. As of today, they own 40%. My CFO traced it back, and the shell corporation is registered to your attorney." "It was you, wasn't it?" I said, "Yes, it was me." There was a pause. Then he said, "Why?" I said, "Because I am your father. That is what fathers do. They watch over their children. They protect them. They invest in them, not to control them, but to support them." Marcus said, "You have been helping me this whole time, even when I told you to stay away." I said, "Yes." He said, "You are impossible. You know that?" I said, "I know." He laughed, a real laugh, warm and genuine. He said, "Thank you, Dad." I said, "You are welcome, son." That conversation changed something between us. Marcus started calling more often, not just once a month, but every week. Sometimes just to talk about his day, sometimes to ask my advice on business decisions, sometimes just to say hi. I started flying to San Francisco more regularly, meeting the people he worked with, seeing the hospitals his technology was helping, being part of his life in a real way. And slowly, painfully slowly, we rebuilt what we had lost. It was not perfect. There were still moments of tension, still old wounds that would surface unexpectedly. But we were trying. We were choosing each other. We were building something real. Then one evening, Marcus called and said, "Dad, I want you to meet someone. Her name is Jennifer. She is a pediatric oncologist. We have been dating for 6 months. She is incredible, smart and kind, and she actually cares about making a difference in the world. I really like her, and I want you to meet her." I said I would love to meet her. We arranged dinner for the following week. Marcus and Jennifer came to my penthouse. When she walked in, I saw immediately what Marcus saw in her. She was genuine. She asked questions about my life. She listened to the answers. She told me about her work at a children's hospital, about the kids she was trying to save, about why she became a doctor. She was real in a way that Vanessa had never been. At the end of the evening, as they were leaving, Jennifer hugged me. A real hug. She said, "Thank you for dinner, Robert. Marcus talks about you all the time. I can see where he gets his determination." After they left, I sat in my apartment, and I felt something I had not felt in years. Peace. Deep, genuine peace. A year later, Marcus called me. He said, "Dad, I am going to ask Jennifer to marry me. I wanted you to be the first to know." I said, "That is wonderful, Marcus. I am so happy for you." He said, "And Dad, I want you to walk me down the aisle. Not stand in the back. Not hide. I want you with me. I want everyone to know that you are my father, and I am proud of that." I had to pause. I had to take a breath because I was crying. I said I would be honored, Marcus. The wedding was small. 50 people in a botanical garden in San Francisco. It was beautiful and intimate, and full of love. Jennifer's family was there. Marcus's friends. Rosa and her daughters, who I had flown out because they had become part of my family. And me. I stood next to my son as he married a woman who loved him for who he was. Not for what he had, not for what he could give her, but for his heart, for his passion, for his determination to make the world better. During the ceremony, the officiant asked Marcus and Jennifer to turn and thank the people who had supported them. Marcus turned to me. He said, "Dad, you taught me something important. You taught me that love is not about what you have. It is about who you are. It is about showing up. It is about being present. It is about being honest. You were not always perfect. Neither was I. But we figured it out. And I am grateful for that. I am grateful for you." I could not speak. I just nodded, tears streaming down my face. After the ceremony, at the reception, I found myself talking to Jennifer's father. He was a retired teacher, middle class, comfortable but not wealthy. He said, "Marcus is a good man. You raised him well." I said I made a lot of mistakes, but I am trying to do better. He said that is all any of us can do. Keep trying. Keep showing up. Keep loving our kids, even when they make it hard. That night, after the reception, Marcus and Jennifer came to say goodbye before leaving for their honeymoon. Marcus hugged me. A long, tight hug. He whispered in my ear, "Thank you for not giving up on me." I said, "Thank you for giving me another chance." Now, sitting here telling you this story, I am 70 years old. Marcus is 42. He has built a company that is changing healthcare in rural America. He is making a real difference. He has a wife who loves him. He has a life that means something. And he has a father who is proud of him, not because of his success, but because of his character, because of who he became when he had nothing, because of how he got back up after he failed, because of the man he chose to be. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you are watching from. We would love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Looking back on that wedding day 10 years ago, when I walked into that church in a $40 suit and watched my son treat me like I was worthless, I wonder if I would do it again. Would I put myself through that pain? Would I test Marcus like that? Would I risk losing him completely? And the answer is yes. Because that test, as flawed as it was, as manipulative as it was, as hurtful as it was, it forced both of us to confront who we really were. It forced Marcus to face the fact that he had valued money over relationships. And it forced me to face the fact that I had used money as a substitute for love. We both had to fail before we could figure out how to succeed at being father and son. Rosa still lives in Queens. I bought the entire apartment building, renovated it, and made sure every tenant had affordable rent. Rosa retired from her 3 jobs and now runs a community center in the neighborhood. She helps immigrants navigate the system. She teaches English classes. She provides resources for families who are struggling. And she does it all with the same kindness and dignity she showed me when I was pretending to be poor. She taught me that wealth means nothing if you do not use it to lift others up. That money is just paper unless you turn it into purpose. That the richest people are not the ones with the biggest bank accounts, but the ones with the biggest hearts. I think about Catherine Chin sometimes. Vanessa's mother, who told me at Marcus's first wedding to stay away from my son because I was an embarrassment. I wonder if she knows that her daughter's marriage lasted less than 3 years while her former son-in-law went on to build something meaningful. I wonder if she ever thinks about the poor man she dismissed so casually and realizes he was worth $100 billion. I wonder if it bothers her. But probably not. People like Catherine do not learn. They do not reflect. They move through the world measuring everyone by their net worth and never questioning whether that is a good measure of anything. I feel sorry for them. They will never know what it is like to be seen for who they are rather than what they have. The truth is, money reveals character. It does not create character. It reveals it. When I pretended to be poor, I saw who people really were. I saw Marcus's shame, Vanessa's greed, Catherine's cruelty, Ashley's dishonesty. But I also saw Rosa's kindness, Patricia's compassion, Elena's wisdom. Wait, I called her Rosa earlier, but her name is Elena. Actually, I realize I may have used both names. Let me be clear. Her name is Rosa Martinez. She is the woman who lived next door to me in Queens. She is the one who saw through my disguise and treated me with dignity anyway. She is the one who taught me what really matters. And money also revealed my own character. It revealed that I had been using wealth as a shield, as a way to keep people at a distance, as a way to avoid vulnerability. Because when you are a billionaire, every relationship is suspect. Every friendship could be motivated by what you can provide. Every interaction is colored by your net worth. I had hidden behind my money for so long that I had forgotten how to just be a person. The 6 months I spent pretending to be poor were the most painful 6 months of my life. But they were also the most valuable, because they stripped away everything except the truth. The truth about who my son was. The truth about who I was. The truth about what actually matters in life. And the truth is this: love is not about what you can give someone. It is about who you are willing to be for them. It is about showing up when it is hard. It is about being honest when it is uncomfortable. It is about choosing them over your pride, over your hurt, over your need to be right. Marcus and I are building a foundation together now. The Sarah Thornton Foundation for Healthcare Innovation, named after his mother, my wife, the woman who made me promise to teach our son values. We are using my money to fund healthcare technology for underserved communities. We are partnering with Marcus's company and dozens of other organizations to make sure that rural hospitals, inner-city clinics, and community health centers have access to the best diagnostic tools. We are training doctors. We are funding research. We are making a difference. And we are doing it together, father and son, working side by side, building something that matters, something that would make Sarah proud. People ask me all the time now that my wealth is becoming more public because of the foundation. Was it worth it? Was the test worth the pain? Was the revelation worth the risk of losing my son forever? And I tell them yes. 1,000 times yes. Because I would rather know the truth and have a chance to fix it than live in a comfortable lie. I would rather have 5 years of estrangement followed by a real relationship than a lifetime of pretending everything was fine when it was not. I would rather lose everything and find out who really cares than keep everything and never know. The final lesson I learned from all of this is that wealth is not measured in dollars. It is measured in relationships, in purpose, in impact, in the lives you touch and the difference you make. I could have spent my entire life accumulating more billions. I could have died the richest man in the cemetery. But what would that have meant? Who would have mourned me? Who would have remembered me? Who would have cared? Instead, I have a son who calls me every week. I have a daughter-in-law who makes me laugh. I have friends like Rosa who remind me what matters. I have teenagers in the Bronx who send me photos of their first coding projects. I have doctors in rural Montana who email me thank you notes. I have a life that means something, and that is worth more than $100 billion. So if you are watching this and you are measuring your worth by your bank account, I want you to stop. I want you to ask yourself who would show up for you if you lost everything. Who would sit with you on the front steps of a building in Queens and share their homemade food? Who would see you when you are invisible? Who would love you when you have nothing to offer? Those are the people who matter. Those are the relationships worth investing in. Not with money, but with time, with attention, with honesty, with love. And if you are a parent watching this, I want you to know something. Your children do not need your money. They need your presence. They need your time. They need you to see them and know them and love them for who they are, not who you want them to be. I failed at that for a long time. I gave Marcus everything except what he actually needed. And it almost cost me everything. Do not make that mistake. Do not wait until it is too late. Show up now. Be present now. Love them now. Because money can buy a lot of things. But it cannot buy back time. It cannot buy back trust. It cannot buy back a relationship you have neglected for too long. Marcus and Jennifer just told me last week that they are expecting a baby. A girl. They are going to name her Sarah. After her grandmother. After my wife. After the woman who taught me what love really means. I am going to be a grandfather. And I promise you, I promise Sarah, I promise Marcus, I promise that little girl who is not even born yet, I will not make the same mistakes twice. I will show up. I will be present. I will teach her that kindness matters more than success, that character matters more than wealth, that the measure of a life is not what you accumulate, but what you give away. I will tell her stories about her grandmother, about Rosa, about the people who taught me how to be human. And maybe, just maybe, I will tell her about the time her grandfather pretended to be poor to teach her father a lesson, about the test that almost destroyed their family but ultimately saved it, about the truth that can only be found when you strip away everything except what really matters. This is my story, the story of the $100 billion secret, the story of a father and son who lost each other and found each other again, the story of what happens when you measure love instead of measuring wealth. I do not know if it will go viral. I do not know if millions of people will watch this. But I know that if even one person hears this story and decides to call their father, to forgive their son, to show up for the people they love, then it will have been worth telling. Because that is what matters. Not the views. Not the likes. Not the money. The people. Always the people. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And please, let me know in the comments where you are watching from and what this story meant to you. I would love to hear from you.